After the Great War, the world was supposed to be at peace, but the Treaty of Versailles, meant to end all wars, instead sowed the seeds of another. In Germany, economic collapse and national humiliation created a fertile ground for extremism. A charismatic and dangerous figure, Adolf Hitler, rose from obscurity, promising to restore Germany's lost glory. His Nazi party seized power, and the world held its breath as the gears of war began to turn once more. This is the story of the most devastating conflict in human history, World War II. On September 1st, 1939, the uneasy peace shattered. German forces stormed across the border into Poland. This was not just an invasion, it was the dawn of a new kind of warfare. The Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, was a terrifying combination of speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. Tanks, planes, and infantry moved in a coordinated onslaught that Poland simply couldn't withstand. In response, Britain and France declared war on Germany, but it was too late to save Poland. The war had begun. For months, an eerie quiet settled over Western Europe, a period dubbed the Phony War. But in the spring of 1940, the storm broke. Germany's war machine turned west, sweeping through Denmark and Norway. Then, it bypassed France's heavily fortified Maginot Line, attacking through the Ardennes forest, a move thought impossible. The Allied forces were caught completely off guard. The French and British armies were pushed back to the coast, to the beaches of Dunkirk. In a miraculous evacuation, over 300,000 soldiers were rescued by a flotilla of naval vessels and civilian boats, a beacon of hope in a dark time. But it could not prevent the inevitable. On June 22, 1940, France fell. Hitler stood in Paris, and it seemed as though all of Europe was at his feet. Only one nation now stood against the Nazi tide: Great Britain. Hitler planned an invasion, Operation Sea Lion, but first, he had to control the skies. The Battle of Britain began. For months, the German Luftwaffe waged a relentless bombing campaign against British airfields, factories, and cities. The Royal Air Force, though outnumbered, fought back with incredible courage and skill. Every day, the skies over southern England were filled with dogfights. The Blitz brought the war home to civilians, who sheltered in subways and Anderson shelters as bombs rained down. Yet, British resolve never broke. Thanks to the skill of the few, as Churchill called the RAF pilots, and the resilience of the British people, the invasion was thwarted. Britain had survived, but the war was far from over. Confident in his dominance over Western Europe, Hitler made a fateful decision. He turned his attention east, toward his supposed ally, the Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history. 3 million German soldiers poured across the Soviet border, aiming for a swift victory before the brutal Russian winter set in. Initially, the Blitzkrieg worked its devastating magic once again. German armies advanced hundreds of miles, capturing millions of Soviet soldiers and vast territories. They pushed all the way to the gates of Moscow, but they had underestimated the sheer size of the Soviet Union and the resilience of its people. The winter arrived, fierce and unforgiving. The German advance stalled, their equipment freezing, their soldiers unprepared. The war on the Eastern Front became a brutal, grinding war of attrition. The turning point on the Eastern Front came at the city of Stalingrad. In a battle that raged for over 5 months, Soviet and German forces fought street by street, house by house, in some of the most savage combat of the entire war. The city was reduced to rubble. For Hitler, Stalingrad was a symbolic prize he refused to relinquish. For Stalin, it was a line that could not be crossed. The Soviets encircled the German Sixth Army, trapping them in the ruined city. Freezing and starving, the German soldiers were finally forced to surrender in February 1943. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. From this point on, the Red Army would begin its long, bloody push back towards Berlin. The tide had begun to turn in the east. While Europe was engulfed in war, tensions were rising across the Pacific. The Empire of Japan, with its own expansionist ambitions, saw an opportunity. To secure its dominance in Asia and the Pacific, it needed to neutralize the one power that could stand in its way, the United States Pacific Fleet. On the morning of December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, Japanese carrier planes launched a surprise attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The assault was devastating. In less than 2 hours, much of the US fleet was crippled, and thousands of American lives were lost. Japan had hoped the attack would shatter American morale and keep them out of the war. They were wrong. The attack galvanized a shocked and outraged nation. The sleeping giant, as one Japanese admiral reportedly feared, had been awoken. The United States declared war on Japan, and days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the US. The conflict was now truly global. For 2 years, the Allies had been fighting a desperate war, but now they were ready to take the fight back to the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. The plan was Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history. In the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, D-Day, an immense armada crossed the English Channel. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers, American, British, Canadian, and more, landed on 5 beaches along the heavily fortified coastline of Normandy, France. The fighting was ferocious, especially on Omaha Beach, where American forces faced intense German fire and suffered heavy casualties. But through sheer grit and determination, they secured a foothold. This was the beginning of the end for Hitler's regime. The Allies had opened the crucial Western Front, and the race to Berlin was on. As Allied forces advanced deeper into German-held territory from the west and the Soviets pushed from the east, they uncovered the full, unimaginable horror of the Nazi regime. They liberated concentration and extermination camps like Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, and Dachau. The world was confronted with the chilling, systematic reality of the Holocaust. The Nazis had murdered 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, Roma, Poles, political prisoners, and many more, in a state-sponsored genocide of unprecedented scale. The images of emaciated survivors and the evidence of mass murder revealed a depth of inhumanity that left a permanent scar on the conscience of the world. It was a stark and terrible reminder of what they were fighting against. By the spring of 1945, the Third Reich was crumbling. Allied bombers had reduced German cities to ruins. From the west, the Americans and British crossed the Rhine River, while from the east, the Soviet Red Army fought its way into the suburbs of Berlin. The final battle for the German capital was an apocalyptic inferno. Trapped in his bunker beneath the city, Adolf Hitler, the man who had plunged the world into war, took his own life on April 30th. A few days later, on May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered. Victory in Europe Day, or VE Day, was celebrated with joyous relief across the Allied world. The war in Europe was finally over, but the war in the Pacific raged on. Despite devastating losses, Japan refused to surrender, its military leaders vowing to fight to the last man, woman, and child. Faced with the prospect of a bloody invasion of the Japanese mainland that could cost millions of lives, the new American president, Harry Truman, made a momentous decision. He authorized the use of a new, terrifying weapon. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. The city was instantly obliterated. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The devastation was absolute. Faced with this unimaginable power, Emperor Hirohito finally intervened. On August 15th, Japan announced its surrender. World War II was over. The war left the world transformed, with tens of millions dead and entire continents in ruins. It reshaped borders, toppled empires, and ushered in the atomic age. From its ashes rose new global powers and new institutions, like the United Nations, born from the hope that such a catastrophe would never happen again. The legacy of World War II is complex and enduring, a solemn testament to the extremes of human cruelty and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It is a story we must never forget. Thanks for watching, and if you found this journey through history meaningful, please consider liking and subscribing for more.